Is that centered? Is that even? Let's talk UWorld, shall we? How to make UWorld work for you and how to get the most out of the money that you've just spent or that you're thinking about spending. So I did a couple screenshots. You cannot screenshot the questions in UWorld because they're copyrighted. But I took screenshots of different things on the UWorld interface, and hopefully I don't get sued. But I think it'll be helpful for you guys. So first let's talk about questions on if UWorld was worth it. And my answer is yes. I just wanted to make this for people who are debating to purchase UWorld because it is really expensive. I got the 90-day version, even though I didn't use all 90 days, specifically for their self-assessments. They had 2 of them. And I just, my first one when I did maybe like 100, 150 questions in the question bank. And then I took my second one when I had about 200 left in the question bank. So there are about 2,100 questions overall, which can be kind of, well, let's be honest, really overwhelming. I made the personal decision to finish the entire test bank because I wanted that little graph that they have to be the most accurate. I don't know if I have pictures of the graph as I was progressing and taking more questions, but I do have a picture at the end, and this is a graph that you can look at after you take each test. And I think it was just really helpful to gauge where I am. So the red line is what you want to stay above. That is what the average number of people are, how they're performing on UWorld. So my goal was just to stay above that red line. Even though some of my exams, like the question blocks that I did, were not always above like average, let's be honest. So some of the tests that I took, let's say the average was 55, I scored less than the average, and that is the information that I paid attention to. And then the questions that I scored above the green, I kind of would glance through the rationale for those and then go back the ones that I missed if I had extra time after completing my questions for the day. So first let's talk about the subjects and systems. There's different subjects in UWorld and different body systems. Our time with adult musculoskeletal questions. You can go through and pick adult health and then musculoskeletal. What's also really awesome is that after you take a test, it tells you exactly what subject and what subtopic it came from. So it'll tell you that it was adult musculoskeletal or adult respiratory. It was really helpful for me just to assess my knowledge on each subject. So do that. I also wanted to talk about the question cross out feature. So when I took NCLEX, I could not cross out questions on the NCLEX, but I can cross them out on UWorld, which was really helpful when I was kind of processing in my brain and trying to pick the right answer and narrow it down. You can actually click the words in the question and it'll put a strike through that. So you can narrow it down in your head. For NCLEX, they gave me like a whiteboard, and what I do with my multiple choice or select all that apply is that I'll write, let's say there's 4 options, so like A, B, C, D. I will write that on my whiteboard, and as I'm going through and trying to narrow it down, I will cross it off there and then go back and match it to my like on the testing interface, if that makes sense, because you can't cross them out on NCLEX, and that is the first thing I tried, and it didn't work. It just selected the answer as the right answer, and you don't want that. So there's different modes that you can test in UWorld. There's a tutor mode and there's a timed mode. So I personally did not do the time mode. I didn't think that I had issues with completing a certain number of questions like in a certain amount of time. But if you find that maybe in nursing school you ran out of time on tests, or you had trouble like keeping up and taking too long to answer one question, I think the time mode would be super helpful, because it'll give you a time to stay under. When I took NCLEX, I tried not to look at the clock. I did a couple times when I as I was progressing through the exam, just to make sure I wasn't running out of time. With the new NCLEX, the minimum is 60, the max is 130, and you get 4 hours. I did 60 questions, and I think it was like 45 minutes, maybe 50. And I was like, oh crap, I went way too fast. So I think the time mode would be helpful if you test too fast, or if you're having trouble keeping up within the time frame that they give you. Let's talk about tutor mode. So I turned the tutor mode off. So what tutor mode does is after you answer a question, it will tell you if you're right or wrong, and it will give you the rationale as you click the next button before you go on to the next question. I decided to turn the tutor mode off only because NCLEX does not tell you if you're right or wrong right after you answer the question. So I found myself getting used to the instant gratification of, okay, I got that right, let's keep going. And also, like, when I got a question wrong, I would get discouraged. So I decided to turn that off just so I could simulate the most similar environment of NCLEX. If you study in a similar environment, if you take UWorld has a very, very, very similar interface to NCLEX, and then also I turned off the tutor mode. So those are the 3 things I did to make sure that I was testing in a environment that would be most similar to when I tested for NCLEX, also to decrease that test anxiety. Like, no matter what, you can't change that you're going to be in an unfamiliar place. You have to deal with other people around you. Really quiet, but it was off of the highway, so I did hear sirens. But they also give you, like, they gave us noise canceling headphones. So sometimes when I was testing, I would put in earplugs or put just headphones over my ears with nothing playing, just to get used to the silence, because my thoughts are loud and my environment was loud sometimes. Something else that I think is important, different question modes. So you can click unused, incorrect, correct ones if you wanted to review and see if you got them right again, and then custom mode. So custom mode I didn't use, but I went back and looked at it, and you can actually enter a test ID or question IDs to retake that test again and see how you do. So when I decided to take all of the question bank, I would test from the unused portion of my study bank and UWorld, and then after I finished all of that, I went and tested from the incorrect questions that I got from previous tests. So it was kind of helping me go back and see if I could get them right after reading the rationale and studying up on it a little bit. So after you take your test, if you go to the test analysis, you can actually see which categories, which topics that you got wrong, and also in the far corner you can see the number, like what percentile you rank in. Your percentile, that number is the number of people who got that question incorrect. I'm trying to make this make the most sense. So if I answered a question and I got it wrong, and it says that 17% of people got it right, I'm not as discouraged because that was a really hard question. I didn't pick a question that was obviously not the right one. Versus if I pick a question, it's like, oh, well, only 10% of people picked this question that was wrong, so I'm doing something wrong. I need to go back and reevaluate what I'm not getting on that subject or on that topic of question. The resources that UWorld has is the features at the top as you're testing. So there's a little question button. There is a little flashcard with a plus icon, and that's where you can add the question to a flashcard. Super easy. If you're not into writing down everything, like, that should be your go-to. And then also, as I was testing, there is a mark for review in the upper right hand corner of the screen, and if I was between 2 answers, I would mark it for review, or if I guessed and ended up getting it right, I could still go and see which ones I marked for review, and if I guessed on it or if I wasn't sure, I went through those to see what I was missing, if I did guess right, and if I did guess on them, I went back and kind of studied up and looked at the rationale as to why I guessed right. So because you're not doing yourself any justice if you're guessing and getting them right and not actually understanding what the question is or what the critical thinking process should have been in order to find the right answer. So looking at rationale, marking the ones for review that you're not sure about, or if you guessed on, will help you figure out, okay, I guessed right, and this was my thought process, and it was similar, versus I was unsure about this, but I picked the right question or the wrong question for this reason, and they explained to me why it's not that question. So for review was super helpful for me as well. So there is also an area at the top for notes, that if you're working through your thought process, I just would sometimes jot down notes of like, okay, I think I picked this question because I went through the nursing process and then the ABCs and urgent versus non-urgent, and this is how I got to this question. So it's really about self-reflection to get the most out of what you just paid for. When I was running out of time, I didn't do this as much, but I still think it would be helpful for the questions that you do complete, because it's quality over quantity. You're doing yourself no justice if you're just zooming through questions and not really understanding the information. What else? Also, last thing, at the bottom, there is a little tab for resources. You can click resources and it'll pop up. It does like lab values and abbreviations and what they mean. Also, there are two buttons, End and Suspend. Buttons are in the bottom right. Mistake that I made with some of them as I was doing question blocks and maybe had to stop and go to work or got distracted is I would hit End. You don't want to hit End because those questions that you didn't complete will count against you. Instead, coming back to the test, if you want to come back to the test, click the Suspend button. The Suspend button will put it on pause. The questions that you did not complete will not count against your score and overall performance graph. Also, with the self-assessments, I did 2 of them. My first one, I had a high probability of passing. So they're high probability. They say you're likely to pass NCLEX, but there's still quite a few things that you need to review. And then my second self-assessment, I got a very high, I think my score was a 70 something, and the average was 55, but I was in the 94th percentile, which is like amazing. If you're looking at a bell curve, like you're on this side, that's where you want to be. So that was the very high, and that was kind of like my like safety net and like security, and knowing that, okay, if this really hard question bank thinks that I'm gonna pass, like I can have some confidence in myself too. But that is all that I have. I hope that this was helpful. If you still have questions about UWorld, let me know and I will answer all of them if I have the answers to them. But unfortunately, because the questions are copyrighted, I can't show you guys like specific questions or the kind of questions that are on there, because I don't want to get sued. But I hope this was helpful. Let me know and I will see you guys in my next video. Hey, you, remember, you can do this. Do your test day affirmations. I am smart. I am not anxious. I'm confident. I'm excited to show what I know, and I am a registered nurse. I'm rooting for you.